Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you are from and what time you are watching. So let's begin. Below is a fresh take that keeps the forest that isn't on any map premise you're drawn to, but deliberately breaks the template. The narrator is not an auditor or records professional. The horror is sensory and lived rather than documentary. There's no independent databases agree mechanism, no normalized veteran scene, no county GIS setting, and the ending turns outward and costs something concrete instead of settling into procedural dread. The sound at Vesper Line. My son Danny was the one who heard it first, and for a long time I held that against the forest. The way you hold a grudge against a thing that took something from you before you even knew it was there to take. We had moved to the house on Vesper Line Road in March, 3 months after Karen died, because the city had become a set of rooms she used to stand in, and I could not stand in them anymore. I am a piano tuner by trade. It is a good trade for a man who wants to be useful without being seen, and it travels well. There are old pianos everywhere, in churches and school music rooms, in the front parlors of people who inherited them and feel guilty letting them go to ruin. The house was cheap because it was at the end of a dead road against the tree line, an hour out from anything, and because the previous owner had died in it. Danny was 11. He needed a place where nobody knew his mother was dead, and I needed a job that would let me drive away from him for whole days at a time so that neither of us would have to watch the other one not cry at breakfast. The forest started about 40 yards behind the house. I want to describe it accurately because everything I say after this depends on you believing that I am a careful man who does not exaggerate. My ears are my living. I can tell you the difference between a 16-foot pipe and a 32-foot pipe with my eyes shut. I can hear a soundboard about to crack a season before it cracks, and I do not, as a rule, imagine things. The forest behind the house was ordinary. Second growth mixed hardwood, some pine, a lot of it choked with the kind of undergrowth that says nobody has logged or walked here in a long time. It smelled like leaf rot and cold water. There was a track leading into it from the corner of our lot, 2 ruts with grass grown up the middle. The sort of track that once went somewhere and had been let go. The first week, Danny asked me at dinner whether I had heard the machines. I said, "What machines?" He said the machines in the woods at night, like the diggers at the construction site by our old apartment, but far away and going all the time. I told him it was probably a farm, a grain dryer, or an irrigation pump, the kind of thing that runs at night out in the country, and that he'd stop hearing it once it stopped being new. He accepted this because children accept the explanations of the surviving parent as a matter of structural necessity. I did not think about it again for 3 weeks. Then I heard it. I want to be precise. I was standing at the kitchen sink at about 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, drinking water in the dark, and I became aware that I had been hearing something for some minutes without registering it. The way you sometimes realize a refrigerator has been running only when it stops. It was a low sound, mechanical, a broadband industrial hum with a slow beating in it, the interference pattern of 2 large engines running at almost but not quite the same speed. Under it, intermittent, a deeper impact, thud, a pause, thud like a pile driver working at a distance great enough that the sound arrived softened and out of phase with any vibration. It was coming from the woods. It was not a farm. I have tuned the organ in a cathedral that stands next to a rail yard, and I know what heavy industry sounds like carried on night air. And this was heavy industry, A great deal of it, running in a place where the map on my phone showed nothing but a green shapeless blank all the way to the next county road 11 miles east. I stood there for a long time. The beating hum went on. Somewhere in it, once I thought I heard something that was not machinery at all. A rising and falling that could have been a siren, or could have been a voice held long past the length a voice can be held. And I decided, in the way you decide things at 2 in the morning while grieving, that I was tired and that the human ear invents pattern and noise, which is true, and I went to bed. The complaints, I should explain about the complaints, because that is the part I can prove, and it is the part that made me stop trusting my first explanation. After a month of it, Danny was not sleeping. He had gone quiet in a way that frightened me more than the noise did, because a quiet, grieving child is a child doing arithmetic he shouldn't have to do, and I was not going to lose him to a forest after I had already lost so much to a hospital. So I did the ordinary adult procedural thing. I called the county's non-emergency line to report a noise nuisance, industrial noise at night from an unpermitted source. And I gave my address, and I asked whether there was construction or drilling permitted in the woods east of Vesper Line Road. The woman who took the call was patient and a little too fast, the way people are when they have said the same words before. She said she'd log it and someone would follow up. Then she said, and I wrote this down afterward because it snagged on me, she asked, "Is this about the tract off the old Vesper cut past the tree line?" I said I didn't know what it was called. It was just the woods behind my house, she said. That's the one. And there was something in how she said it, a smoothness that I recognize because I use it myself with customers who describe a problem I have heard 100 times. The tone of a person confirming a thing they already know intimately and have decided not to be curious about anymore. Nobody followed up. I called again 2 weeks later. Same thing. The second woman also knew the location before I finished describing it. The third time I called, I got a young man who put me on hold and came back and said a unit had already been out to the location the previous month on a similar complaint and found no permitted activity, but was unable to identify a responsible party and that the matter was noted. I asked what the location was called. He said, reading, "It's under Vesper Cut/East Tract." I asked what agency owned it. He went quiet and then said that field would have to be filled in by land records, and it wasn't, and that he'd flag it. He was kind. He was also, I understood later, doing exactly what everyone before him had done, which was to be helpful and to add nothing. Here is the thing that turned my grief fog into something colder. I am a curious man by temperament, and I had the internet, and I had learned in a former life how to submit a public records request. Because tuning a school district's pianos had once required proving I hadn't overbilled them. So I filed a request for all noise nuisance and environmental complaints associated with the location behind my house, going back as far as they kept them. I did not expect much. Rural county, small budget, probably a shoebox of paper. They sent me 60 years of it, not to the woods to me, in a PDF, a compliance clerk apologizing that some of the older ones were scanned poorly. There were, across those decades, dozens upon dozens of complaints, and they were filed by different people. People whose names changed and whose handwriting changed and whose descriptions of the sound never agreed. One in 1971 reported roaring like a mill and animals screaming. One in the 1980s reported generators constant all night and men calling out numbers. One from just a few years ago reported a low humming that gets into your teeth and a siren that doesn't stop and doesn't move. Machinery, voices, sirens. A woman in 1994 wrote in a shaking cursive that she heard singing far in, and it does not sound like people should sound. No two of them heard the same thing. Every single one of them located it in the same place. The same track off Vesper line, the same tree line. Words across 60 years that matched my own so closely, I felt the hair stand on my arms. Past the old cut, east of the last house on the road. And clipped to many of them were the county's own responses. This is what undid my ability to think of it as folklore. Real inspectors had gone out. There were terse field notes. Responded, no responsible party located, no permitted activity. Area not under active management. Sheriff's deputies had assisted on a couple of the louder nights. A road crew had, at one point decades ago, closed the Vesper Cut track for public safety for a season and then reopened it with no explanation on file. The county had spent real hours and real fuel and real payroll responding over and over for 60 years to complaints about a forest, and every single response form had the same hollow center. No owner, no permit, no map. The location field in the older paper forms was filled in by hand. Vesper Cut/East Tract. In the newer digital ones, it was a code that resolved, when I looked it up in the county's own online parcel viewer, to nothing. The viewer showed my house, my lot, the road, and then, east of my tree line, an unbroken green field of unclassified with no parcels drawn in it at all, stretching 11 miles, in a county where every square foot of ground is owned by someone and taxed. I am not a conspiracy man. I looked for the boring answer the way I look for a false beat before I decide two strings are truly out of tune. Maybe it was federal land off the county map because the county doesn't map federal holdings the same way. But federal land is on federal maps, and it wasn't. Maybe it was old railroad or utility right-of-way, unassigned. But right-of-way is narrow, and this was 11 miles wide. Maybe the parcel viewer was just old and bad, but the historical aerial photos the county also sent, going back to flights in the 1950s, showed the same thing my modern satellite views showed. Unbroken forest canopy, no clearings, no roads inside it, no mills, no towers, no pits. Nothing that could make the sound of a pile driver running all night. 60 years of people hearing heavy industry inside a forest that 60 years of aerial photography shows to be nothing but trees, and 60 years of a government responding to them anyway and finding nobody home. I should tell you what I did, because I did the thing you are not supposed to do, and I want to be honest that I chose it. On a clear morning in June, with the woods silent the way they always were in daylight, I walked in. I brought Danny to a neighbor 2 miles up the road, a widow named Alma who fed him cookies and had, when I mentioned the woods, gone still in a way I noted and did not yet understand. I brought water, my phone, a compass, because I do not trust phones under canopy, and this is the piano tuner in me, a decent handheld sound recorder, the kind I use to capture a room's resonance. Because if there was a sound, I wanted it on something other than my own memory. I walked the Vesper Cut track east from the corner of my lot into the trees on a bright, dry morning, and I want to be clear that in daylight it was only a forest. Ordinary, beautiful even. Birds. The track ran on, softening, the ruts filling in with fern, until it stopped being a track and was just a slightly clearer line through the trees that I could follow because I was looking for it. I walked for what my phone, before it lost signal, said was about 2 hours and a little under 4 miles. The forest did not change. That is the first thing I noticed, and it took me a while to notice it, because the absence of change is a hard thing to see. In an ordinary wood, 4 miles will take you across something: a stream, a ridge, a change in the trees, a fence, a road, a power line, the edge of a field. This forest gave me none of it. The same second growth hardwood, the same undergrowth, the same soft light, mile after mile, as though I were walking on a wheel that turned the same scenery back under my feet. My compass held steady east. My legs told me I was climbing and descending real ground, real roots, real fallen logs I had to step over. But nothing arrived. Nothing ever arrived. And then, in the middle of a bright, silent June afternoon, deep in a forest that the government of my county insisted did not exist, I began to hear the machines. Not at night this time, in full daylight with the sun through the leaves. It came up out of the ground the way it had come up in my kitchen, from beneath the level of hearing to just above it, the broad mechanical hum with its slow, terrible beating, and under it the spaced impact. Thud, pause, thud, closer now than it had ever been from the house, close enough that I should have been able to see whatever was making it. And there was nothing to see, only more trees, and the trees did not vibrate, the leaves did not stir with it. My recorder, I checked it later, at home, and this is the only piece of physical evidence I have, and I have not let anyone else listen to it. My recorder caught it. It is on the file, a low, broadband industrial hum with a beat frequency of about half a hertz and intermittent low-frequency impacts, recorded in a place where a satellite that same week photographed only canopy. Under the machinery, near the end of the 4 minutes I recorded before I turned and walked out fast, there is a sound my equipment rendered as a rising human tone, sustained far past the length of any breath. And it is not wind, because there was no wind. And it is not an animal I have ever heard. And I have not been able to make myself play those last 30 seconds more than once. I did not run quite. I walked out east to west on my compass, faster than I had come, and the forest let me go without changing, and the sound sank back down under the floor of hearing behind me. And I came out at the corner of my own lot as the light was going long, my legs shaking, having gone 4 miles in, and, by the light, considerably less than 4 miles worth of hours back out. I have thought a great deal about that discrepancy, and I have decided not to trust my sense of time on that day. Because a man alone and frightened is a bad clock, and I would rather doubt myself than the sun. Alma is the reason I am writing this down, instead of only filing it away in the box where I keep the things I cannot fix. When I picked up Danny, she walked me to my truck out of his hearing, and she said without my prompting, "You went in." I said yes. She did not ask what I heard. She said her husband had gone in 40 years ago when they were young and the sound had kept a colicky baby awake. Gone in with a rifle and a jerry can, meaning to find the mill or the drilling rig or whatever it was and make it stop, and that he had come out different, quieter, and that he never spoke of it and never went near the tree line again, and that he had made her promise one thing, which she was now making me promise: not to keep going in. She said the county learned this a long time ago, the men who drive out on the complaints. She said they go to the edge, they stand at the tree line, They write down that they responded and that they found no responsible party, and they leave. And this is not cowardice. It is the only correct procedure anyone has ever found. Because the ones who write no responsible party located and go home come home. And the ones who go looking for the responsible party are looking for something that is answering. And the sound, she said, the sound is not a nuisance. It is a doorbell. It rings so that someone will come toward it. Everybody who calls it in, she said, is telling on themselves. They heard it, which means it's already got their ear. The only thing you can do after that is not walk toward it. I have made the promise. I am keeping it. And I want to be clear that keeping it is the entire point of this account, because it is the opposite of what my nature wants. My whole life has been walking toward a sound to find out what is wrong with it and fix it. I cannot fix this. There is nothing to tune. So I have done the thing that cost me, which is to sell the house. We are leaving Vesperline. I found a buyer faster than the market should have allowed, a young couple, no children, and I stood in my kitchen at closing and did not tell them about the sound, and I will carry that. I told myself they might not hear it. Some people never seem to. But Alma heard me not telling them, I think, in the pause I left, and she looked at me with something that was not judgment. Because she has spent 40 years married to a man who came out of those woods quiet, and she knows exactly the size of the thing I was failing to say. Danny is sleeping again, in the motel where we are staying until the new place in the city is ready. Back among the rooms his mother stood in, which turned out to be more bearable than a forest that answers. He has not asked about the machines in a while. Last night, though, in the motel, with the interstate humming a mile off, he sat up in the dark and said, "Dad, is that the woods?" And it was not. It was only traffic, only the ordinary river of engines that runs under every city all night. And I told him so, and he lay back down. But I lay awake a long time listening to that traffic, the broad mechanical hum of it, and somewhere in the small hours I caught myself doing the thing my ear cannot help doing, listening down into it, under it, for the slow half-hertz beating of two great engines running at almost but not quite the same speed. And for a while I will not lie about this, because I have decided the only thing I still own is not lying about this. For a while I was not certain it wasn't there.